Hi, Sean. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. I'm super excited to be speaking with you. We're both in the legal ops space, and you're in the field much longer than me, so I'm sure I will learn a lot from you today.
No, thank you for very much for having me. Excited and yeah, very nice to chat. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much. How's your day going? I think it's around afternoon your time.
Yeah, I'm based here in Amsterdam. So yeah, it's been a good start to the week. Busy day. We have a couple big projects going on at the moment with some deadlines here end of the month. So yeah, good, busy, but doing well, and things are moving in the right direction, which is important.
That's great. I'm actually very curious how you ended up with Heineken because I've seen on your profile that you actually studied in Florida. So are you American and you moved for the job, or what happened there?
I did, yeah. So I'm originally from Florida, born and raised. Moved around the U.S. a little bit for a few different jobs after university, and then moved with my wife to Ireland in 2017. Spent a few years there, and then we relocated here to Amsterdam, to the Netherlands, for this role here with Heineken 4 years ago now, in the summer of 2021. And yeah, it's been a very good experience so far. Really enjoying working here at Heineken. It's a great company. It's a great team that I get to work with every day here on the legal side, and yeah, it's been a great experience.
And actually, I'm super interested in that shift from one company that was in a totally different industry to another company because you moved from like tech company to Heineken, which is like a beer producer, right?
Yep.
How was that? Because I moved from the dentistry space in like an acquisition company that was buying dental clinics into a tech company, and to
Okay.
me, that shift was I don't know even how to put it, but it was interesting because everything was new. Like I knew legal operations from my previous role, but I didn't know the business at all, right? Like the new business. And it was hard for me to, at the beginning, pinpoint what needs to be changed, what process, because if I didn't know any of their processes, how the departments correlate and work with each other, I didn't know really like what to change. I had to learn the business first. So how was that for you? And now 4 years in, how was the beginning of that journey at Heineken? I think many people struggle with a similar experience where they know legal operations, but they don't know the business. So how did you end up learning the business and how long did it take?
Yeah, I'd be lying if I said I, knew it all inside and out at this point, even 4 years in. So Heineken is a very complicated business. It's one that, yeah, it's grown leaps and bounds over the last several decades through largely through acquisition. And each of those companies, which we refer to as operating companies or opcos, all feed up to Heineken International. That's where I work, is at the head office here in Amsterdam. But we have, yeah, hundreds of breweries around the globe, more than 80 operating companies around the globe. We operate through joint ventures and a lot more companies, or excuse me, a lot more countries. And each of those has their own uh, intricacies and own complications and own legislations with regards to the alcohol and beer industry, um, and just their own histories. And so it's a very, yeah, it's a very complicated business, a very large organization, nearly 100,000 employees, 90,000 plus around the globe. And so it's a lot to learn. Yeah. And my background is not at working at other large FMCG companies. I didn't come from, a Unilever or Coca-Cola or something like that. So it was a big change for me. Yeah, I had never worked at a company even a tenth of the size of Heineken. So it's been a very uh, big adjustment, and with that come a lot of pros and I think a lot of cons, like most things in life, right? There's yeah, a balance. So it's been yeah, again, a good experience, and one that definitely required a lot of studying almost to figure out which way was up. And like every organization, lots of acronyms that people like to use and things that they just assume everyone understands. But they've been patient, and I think over time I've absorbed quite a bit, and so now I'm yeah, well versed in the various ways that the company operates.
No, I understand that. But could you share maybe your approach to learning the business initially? Because I think that what people might be interested in, there'll be lots of legal operations professionals listening to this podcast, and many of them may find themselves in a similar position. And I like my approach, I would say, was just to speak with people, like get on one-on-one meetings and learning what they're doing, what's their role within the company, and then I was trying to connect the dots, like how the departments work with one another, and then go from there. And then I was lucky because when I first joined, we were in the process of implementing a CLM. And as you know, like you can learn a lot from creating the workflows in the CLM, because then it shows you like how the team creates the agreements, how they work with one another. So that helped me. But I think without that, I would be really lost and I wouldn't really know where to start. So where did you start? Your first day at Heineken, you joined, and then what you started meeting with people to learn what they're doing, or like what was your approach to learning the business?
Yeah, I think definitely, I refer to it as a bit of a learning, or excuse me, a listening tour, scheduling meetings with as many people as I could, both from legal here at head office, as well as other functions, across the globe, just to try and get an understanding on, yeah, how are we working, we from the legal side, with these other people and other departments, other functions across the organization. And there's a lot of nuance, as I mentioned earlier, an operating company in New Zealand and one in yeah, Israel or Egypt or anywhere you can think of. They all have their own unique situations. So trying to understand what's working, what's not, and how we can yeah, let's say double down on what we're doing well and improve on what we're not doing so well. And then yeah, understand what the biggest pain points are from the business, and then that's a good idea of where I can then start to focus my time and resources to try and impact those areas that are causing the biggest pains. And then, yeah, I mean, honestly, doing things like reviewing our annual report was one of the things I did, I think actually before I started, but just to try and understand how does this business operate? How big are these regions? What's the intricacies, et cetera? Yeah, we're a publicly held company, so there's a lot of publicly available information. So I tried to digest that as much as possible. But at the same time, trying to come in very open minded and yeah, asking people what they are doing, asking them if I can join meetings, yeah, and then asking why we're doing things a certain way. Just being curious, I think, is a good way to put it.
I think that's very important, to be curious and to be learning from us. One second here, because my cat is going in my way all the time. She's usually
No
very
problem.
quiet, and now she's just trying to go into the lens here. But that's fine.
No
I'll cut her
worries.
out. Yeah. So I think your approach is great. I didn't think of reviewing the public information, so that's a great tip for other people to do that. What type of information did you extract from that?
Yeah, the annual report is, it's a publicly available document on our public website, and it outlines the company strategy. It outlines performance. Highlights certain, yeah, important strategic things and events that took place throughout the year. Shareholder information, all this stuff, and certainly some of it, yeah, I don't necessarily need to know the answer to every single thing that goes on across every single operating company within Heineken, but a lot of the high level information, at least, was very helpful, so that I understand even how the regions are broken down. We break the business down into 4 regions, and to understand some of the measurements and some of the acronyms that we use, which are available and are explained in the annual reports. That's very helpful. And again, I had never worked at an FMCG company or any sort of consumer goods organization. So yeah, I had never worked somewhere where we have these giant breweries and facilities where we're making product and using raw materials. Like that's a new thing to me. Now, I'm not necessarily involved in that on a day-to-day basis, but of course, we have to think about our consumers, and that's a very close thing to the end product that the consumers enjoy. And so we need to, yeah, understand kind of how all of that works and some of the implications from what happens on the in the brewery into the product that ultimately ends up on the shelves or in the bar or restaurant that someone will enjoy. So yeah, there's a lot of good information in any publicly held company's annual report. So if you're working at one or you're thinking about working at one, give it a look. It's a lot. Don't get me wrong; it's a long document, but yeah, it's a good introduction, if nothing else.
That's a great advice. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
And how many people are in your team right now? I assume when you started it was just you, but did your team grow in the last 4 years?
Yeah, so I was hired 4 years ago now and was hired to initiate and lead the legal operations function here at Heineken. And initially, I was reporting to one of our leadership team members within legal, and she was particularly passionate about this subject and was excited to kind of take that on and to lead that. And so I was reporting directly to her, and it was wonderful. Had a amazing first 4 years. We had a reorg this year. One of our leadership team members stepped into our company secretary role, and so as a result, there was a slight reorg to our leadership team. And with that change, we agreed that it was time to carve out legal operations and move it to be its own team. And so now I report directly to our general counsel, and I have a team here in Amsterdam of two full timers. We have an internship program, and then we have several contractors across the globe and some of our regional hubs. And then in our shared services center in Krakow in Poland.
Oh,
And so
I'm
those
from Poland. That's
contractors,
great to hear.
yeah, yeah. No, I saw that on your on your background. Yeah, so we have a large shared services center in Poland. It's very heavily populated by our finance and our IT functions. But within legal, we have some folks based there as well. And yeah, some of these contractors support us with a number of different projects, like our CLM project, and we have some people doing things like contract review and spend management and some other things there. So yeah, officially here in Amsterdam, there's me, two others, plus an intern, and then we have several other contractors spread across the globe.
And I'm curious, how did you divide like your department? Did you divide it into like a certain pillars? Let's say you obviously lead the team, but then your other two team members, one of them is doing a specific thing and the other is focused on something else, or are they just helping with everything that you're doing?
Yeah, good question. So at the moment, one is solely focused on CLM.
Okay,
Uh,
yeah, that
we
needs
have a big
attention for sure.
yes, takes a lot of time and attention. I'm also heavily involved in that project in a lot of things like planning with the operating companies that we're going to implement next year. This all has to be planned well in advance and budgeted for. So there's a lot of things that take place there. Um, and then we're in the midst of going live with our global procurement team very soon. And that's a big moment for us on this project. It's actually coming up in just a couple of weeks. So very excited about that, but it's been a lot of work for the hundreds of people within global procurement here in Amsterdam who will start using that platform. And then we have the other person I mentioned is kind of in charge of all things spend management and vendor management. And he's also a trained paralegal, so he does some things like signature coordination and manages our Chamber of Commerce and filing things and some like old share certificates and things of that nature. So he also has some experience with that, and he's been working at Heineken for a while. So it makes sense, and he yeah is taking on kind of more and more as we he's new to the team, less than a year now. He was in an admin like business support type of role within legal, and then we had a need, and he had a very good skill set and background for us. So yeah, at the moment, that's how we handle it, and then I handle a lot of the other things going on. But yeah, we have ideas to continue to grow, perhaps through a new full timer in our shared services center or elsewhere. So yeah, lots going on, but at the moment, that's the way it's kind of divvied up.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And how you guys use those interns? Do you try to give them more of like admin tasks that your team doesn't have time for, or are you trying to coach them into like legal ops professionals? Hopefully in the future, do they have interest in legal operations, or are those interests mostly just interns? They're just looking for a position, or is their interest actually in pursuing legal operations in the future? What do you think?
Yeah, we've been very fortunate. Over the last couple of years now since we kind of formalized this internship program as a dedicated legal
Okay.
operations intern. Yeah, we've had a lot of applicants. It's becoming more and more common. People are interested. They're going to school with this as an actual
Yeah.
career after graduation in mind. And yeah, here in the Netherlands, there's several universities that offer like legal tech courses and things as part of their studies. And yeah, we had one last year after graduation. She got a job at a law firm doing legal operations here in the Netherlands. We had one earlier this year who's continuing her master's now, but was very interested in legal operations and wants to do something in that upon her graduation. And then our current intern is graduating at the end of the year. This is kind of her final project, is this internship, and she wants to go directly into legal operations, doesn't have an interest in practicing law. So, yeah, we've been very fortunate, and we definitely try and give them an opportunity to do as much as they possibly can and as much as they want. So, try to expose them to as many different projects and things going on that we can. And so it's been a very, I think, mutually beneficial role for us and for them. And yeah, really try to challenge them a bit and let them challenge us. And I couldn't speak more highly of the people we've had over the last couple of years.
It's amazing, and it looks like it's the field of legal operations must be pretty big in Netherlands and maybe even more broadly in Europe. What would you say is it known field right now? Because I would tell you in Canada, where I am currently, it's not that big. It's growing, but definitely nothing that you can compare to how it's like in US. And I'm not sure how it looks like in Europe, but I know it must be present because I went one time to a clock conference in London, and there were people from all over Europe, and I was super surprised that it's a thing in Europe. So, what do you think? Is it growing? Like when you first joined Heineken, was it smaller back then, 4 years ago? Did you see like a bigger change over the years?
Yeah, it's definitely growing quite a bit. I mean, when I started 4 years ago, I was the first hire in this role at Heineken, and you still had a lot of companies that were hiring for their very first or maybe second early on in that kind of trajectory. But I think less and less you're seeing companies hiring for the first. It's hiring for the second or third, that sort of thing. So it's definitely grown a lot, and so you see teams like ours that it's gone from one to three, plus other contractors across the globe, and that's becoming more and more common. And there's teams of much more than three at organizations all across Europe. It's definitely growing a lot. I think, kind of moved from the US to the UK first, and then now it's really here to stick on mainland Europe. And I think the Netherlands is, at least from what I can tell, one of the more, I'd say places where this has taken a foothold the quickest across Europe, but it's growing very quickly in places like Spain and Portugal and Switzerland and France. It's growing quite a bit. The Nordics as well. I know there's several startups and also like legal tech startups and also companies with very successful legal operations teams now spread all across Europe. And then I know personally of, as I mentioned, Heineken with their shared services center in Poland. We have some legal talent there, and I know several other large organizations that are doing the same. So yeah, it's growing. It's not just one or two countries in Europe. It's made it across all the way to Eastern Europe and everywhere in between. So it's growing quite a bit, but it's definitely like here to stay, and it's becoming more and more common to hear people talking about it. And when you say what you're doing, it's not like a you're maybe not everyone is totally unaware. You're talking to a group, only a couple of people.
Yeah, that's great. That's so great to hear that it's spreading in Europe. How
Yeah,
would you explain the field to somebody who doesn't know it? And maybe to those who are listening and would be interested in pursuing that, but they don't quite have the idea of what the day to day looks like. You explained your role as a leader, but like, what does legal ops entail? Like, what does it mean to you after those
yeah,
4 years?
yeah. I think that's one of the biggest challenges, to be honest, about the profession is that there is not an accepted definition of what legal operations is, and it varies drastically company to company. I mean, a lot of times you see a legal operations role, and the whole scope of the role is managing, the invoicing process. And then you can similarly see a legal operations role and maybe even the same title, like legal operations manager or something to that effect. And that could be leading the entire function where you're in charge of, multi-million dollar budgets, like CLM projects, e-discovery, etc. And those are just categorically different jobs. It doesn't mean one is better or worse than the other. They're just different jobs. But to have that same title can be confusing. And there is, again, no set definition that everybody thinks of when they hear the word legal operations. Now, maybe in the US, it's a little clearer. I would argue still unclear, but I think in Europe as well, it's still, yeah, it's not super clear. Again, I'm from the U.S., born and raised, but I've lived now in Europe for 8 years, so I think have a decent perspective, and yeah, that's still one of the challenges. To me, what does legal operations mean? Is it's the day-to-day workings and processes, the ways of working, tools and technologies that the legal team, is doing and is using on a daily, weekly basis. Uh, at Heineken, it also includes things like helping to manage the budget of the function, which I think is a core piece of it. It also includes all of the communication for the function, so things like our town halls and managing our internal communications tools and sharing updates from legal to people outside. Things of that nature is also something that legal is in charge of. And I've heard other people describe it as basically, everything that the lawyers don't want to do or you don't need to be a lawyer to do. That's what legal operations is. And while I'd say that's maybe a funny response, it's not entirely untrue.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think this is maybe not exactly what your question is, but
No, it
we're just
is.
chatting here. One thing that I think is super, at least to me, um, super interesting is when I see legal operations roles where, the JD or law degree or years of practicing law is a prerequisite. And I just don't understand why that has to be the case. That's not to say a
Hmm.
lawyer can't be a wonderful legal operations person, but to have that as a prerequisite is so short-sighted and unnecessary, in my opinion.
I agree.
That yeah, so when you see things like that, then I think there's still a very clear disconnect of what legal operations is, because if you're hiring for a role where you're going to practice law, then I don't really think that's a legal operations role. And if
Hmm.
you're not going to practice law, then why do you need a JD? So yeah, I still think there's a big disconnect with what it is and what it means and the value that it can provide. However, I know my general counsel is part of several organizations and groups with other GCs across Europe, and yeah, they're all really focused on not just having a legal ops team, which I think was basically they were all trying to race to get something in place in the last few years, but
Hmm.
now it's really quantifying and telling the value that legal operations is providing. And yeah, that's a fair request. If they're going to hire for a new role and create a new team, then you should be able to explain very clearly what it is that you're providing to the business.
Exactly. And so, could you expand on that and tell everyone what legal operations department actually brings into the business, because as you mentioned, there are many of the companies who didn't invest in the function just yet, but they are probably going to over the next couple of years. So in your view, again, how do you think legal operations contributes to the business as a whole? Because I see that in some ways we're actually enabling other stakeholders within other departments to do their jobs too, like for example through a CLM, where other business stakeholders actually are using it as well, and their processes are getting smoother because of the implementation of the solution. So it's not only that we're impacting strictly the legal function, I think. What do you think?
No, no, totally agree. Yeah, I mean, legal is very often not working. I'd say most often not working in a silo. Right? We're not just off creating contracts to create a contract. A contract is created because there's a business need, either to sell product, or to buy something, or whatever. Um, so that's a very obvious example. And like, yeah, our CLM has thousands of users.
Mhm.
Maybe 100 of them are from the legal team.
Yeah.
It is a business tool.
Yes.
Um, so yeah, I mean, some of your standard KPIs and things that you see about CLM in terms of contract turnaround time, identifying bottlenecks, revenue generation, etc. Things like that are pretty standard. Thankfully, with our CLM, very easy to pull out and to articulate. And then also um, anything we're doing on the legal spend management side. So yeah, both in terms of how we went to market and ended up evaluating vendors against one another and selecting a firm, down to the actual invoicing process and using our e-billing tool to help us share a story there and help us to enforce what we've agreed upon up front, with budgets, billing guidelines, and then identify savings, and then sharing that information up from our GC, his colleagues on the executive level, and a lot of other things. I mean, we have various tools for things related to data privacy, things for our business conduct team, things like an internal speak up tool, for example, or conflict of interest for that nature. So we have, quite a few tools that are in place that are being leveraged. But yeah, I would say nearly all of them are business applications
Hmm.
where legal is helping to drive that, but we are by no means, the only ones benefiting or using it.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, that's a great point, and I think that people may forget about that, especially those people who are not involved in legal operations, and those companies that don't have the department. They may feel like we don't need it, right? So they don't
Yeah.
see the value behind it because they just don't see how widely it spreads. Um,
Yeah, I think another thing to keep in mind too is like, even if you don't have a dedicated legal operations team, you're probably doing something, at least tangentially related to legal operations. You're just having someone do it in their spare time or on the side,
yes.
and it's not a focus, so it's not being done well, right?
Mhm.
So it's like with anything, if you want to do it well, you really have to invest in it, and you have to give it the time and attention that it desires.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think in many ways it's kind of as simple as that. Uh, but again, it's down to the legal ops team to be able to then articulate the value and show how they're helping to drive. Yeah, I think one thing I try to do is really tie everything we do back to our company strategy.
Mhm.
So we our company strategy, as we were talking about earlier. You can read our annual report, read
Mhm.
about our evergreen company strategy and the pillars, and I try then to tie everything back to one or more of those pillars. And then also within the legal team, we identified priorities at the beginning of the year, and tying everything back to those priorities uh, is a very effective way of making your case and sharing your story of why people care about what you're doing and
Mhm.
why they should, respond or leverage the tool that's been implemented or whatever the case may be. Because again, we're not just doing these things for fun; we're
Yeah.
doing them for a good reason. And if we're talking about procuring a software and going through all the trouble of getting it set up, and then the change management, and then going live, we're certainly not doing that for fun. We're doing
Mhm.
that. It's not cheap. Uh,
That's
it took a lot of time, a lot of energy. It costs money. So there's a lot of things to think about. But if you can again make it clear why we are doing that and tying it to those priorities, the company strategy, that's one thing that I do religiously, and I think
true.
it works well.
Okay, I think that's a great advice because I spoke with many legal ops professionals who are struggling with just that. Everyone's asking, how do we prove value of the legal ops department? That they're doing all the work, and they're involved in so many different projects and so many different initiatives, and their days are full, right? But they're, like you said, they're not able to really articulate that to the leaders of the companies for them to see that value. But your approach to tying it into the strategy of the business, I think it's great. What steps do you take to do that? Because another thing that I hear from legal ops professionals is that when they listen to advice on podcasts, it's very high level and they don't actually know the next step. So how would they do that? Would you do that once a year? You would sit down with your team and you would just review the goals of the company and then try to build on that? Like, would you just cascade the tasks, or how would you
No,
go?
it's definitely. I definitely don't think it's a once a year thing. It has to be, yeah, regularly. And when I here, I'll go on a.
Mhm.
This might be a long answer, so
Go
give
ahead.
me a
That's, I
second
think
here,
that's what
but
people
I'll try to
need.
get
Yeah.
to bring them all together at the end. So
Okay.
one thing I recently started doing was I started sending a weekly email to our general counsel, kind of summarizing the week for legal operations. We're a big Microsoft customer, so I use Copilot, which has access to our emails and Teams messages and all of our meetings and files and everything. And I have a prompt I use once a week, and it comes up with a nice week summary. I then add in things that I know have taken place from other people from the team. I tie all of them, and this is part of the prompt, back to our strategies, excuse me, our company strategy into our legal priorities. I send that out. So that's a way I am articulating clearly to our GC what it is that we're working on and what we are doing. Because, of course, he can't be involved in every single thing that goes on all the time. So that's one thing. And then, yeah, whenever we're talking about, let's say, planning for 2026, which we had our first budget submission. It goes through a very long process. We had that actually a couple of months ago already, and it's right now going through the process. Part of that is if we're saying, hey, next year we want to have I'm just throwing out an example. We want to replace our e-discovery solution. Let's say that was a project we wanted to take on next year. Having a very clear one pager of why we want to do this, what is the reason why we need to do it, but also why we need to do it now. What is the cost? What's the value we expect to receive from this, and why we're going to ask for money, and then dedicate our time and other people's times to, procure this software, implement, change management, etc. As we talked about a minute ago, that is almost always a very long and expensive process. If we're going to do it, then we really need to everyone needs to be on the same page and agree that this is a priority based on our company strategy, and then from the legal side, our priorities. And then I need to make that message clear to everyone within legal and outside of legal. If we're talking about a CLM tool, for example, of why we are doing this and how it's going to help them and how it's going to help Heineken. And then our team needs to be very clear that, yeah, if I'm working on our CLM project, I know that this is tied to our efficiencies priority for legal, and I know that this is tied to our be the best connected brewer, for example, which is part of our evergreen strategy. So those are just maybe a couple of ways, but yeah, it has to be part of the conversation. I think literally every conversation that you're having, you don't need to necessarily say it outright. We're here because this ties into it, but it needs to always be on your mind. And when you are introducing this or working on a strategy for the next year or talking about a project that you want to take on, then you need to ask yourself, and then you need to be clear to everyone involved. Why are we doing this? And that's one thing that it doesn't come super naturally to me, is to
Mhm.
say no when someone comes and wants to do something. So
Yeah.
I've had to really challenge myself. and learn how to say no and push back because I can't do everything.
Yes.
And so, if something comes across our the table that I think is very interesting and could help us, however, it doesn't fit our priorities and it doesn't tie to our company strategy, I need to say no. And so that's something also that I've used a couple of times in a response to someone who's asked for something that I just simply couldn't prioritize at that moment. That good idea, but now is not the time based on these criteria.
So you just put them kind of on your parking lot, and you look at it maybe a couple years down the road.
Yeah,
You keep track
exactly.
of those.
Yeah, I mean the priorities are always changing as
Hmm.
teams change and we have availability and once you get a huge project kind of off your plate so to speak
Hmm.
and it goes into more business as usual and you're not in that kind of super hyper focused implementation phase, then maybe we do have the ability to take on a new project like ABC that someone else had come up with, or maybe there's a way for us to leverage a consultant or a external party to help us with a certain project. We've had some examples like that. So yeah, it doesn't no right now doesn't mean no tomorrow or certainly not no next year. It just means look right now I can't do that. I have to focus on these other four priorities. Once we get past those, then we can talk. And we can always put something in the plans for next year. Plans change, as you know,
Hmm.
right? You can't make any decisions today and never look back at them ever again. You need to constantly be kind of evaluating what you're doing and what your roadmap includes, and make sure it still meets the needs of the business as those needs might change.
Yes, I think that's very important advice because, again, when speaking with legal ops professionals, they're typically overwhelmed with the amount of tasks on their plates, and many of them are sharing the same thing as you just mentioned, that they just can't say no and they just say yes to everything, and then they have a list of tasks and projects that are open, and they cannot finish all of them at the same time, or they never get to the things on their list that they said yes to that are at the bottom of their list, and then they feel like they're not bringing value to those people who requested. So very good advice to learn how to say
Yeah, I
no.
think, no one gets into legal operations because they don't want to work hard and
Mm.
they don't want to do things that are going to be challenging and they don't want to you know, be innovative. Like I think and solve problems. I think those are
Mm.
commonalities across anyone in legal operations. If it's not, I would argue maybe legal operations isn't the perfect place for you. But most people get into legal operations because they want to problem solve and they want to take on these big challenges. So yeah, by default, then you're the type of person who is going to see a problem and then want to try and solve it, right? And that's something I also in my personal life, like if my wife, if there's something going on at home, I immediately jump into fix it mode. I have to try and take a step back sometime. Like, is this something that you want me to fix, or do you want to talk about this? So, both at work and at home,
Mhm.
I'm working on it. But I think that is one of the reasons I'm drawn to legal operations. Many of the people I know in legal ops are the same way. So
Mhm.
I think it's not necessarily a bad thing that it doesn't come naturally, but it is something that you can work on.
Yeah, and how did you end up learning how to say no? Is it just because you got overwhelmed as well by the number of tasks on your plate, and then you just had to start saying no? How did um, build? I know it's not courage, but it's just like I think what you just mentioned. We all want to do everything for everyone, and then we don't want to disappoint anyone who comes to us, right? So how did you
Yeah,
deal with that little voice telling you like, oh, I should do it. It's not such a big project, but you shouldn't take it on. You know what I mean?
yeah. No, I think like many things in life, there's the saying that necessity is the mother of all invention. So yeah, I basically I
Yeah.
had too many things on my plate, so
Mm.
I had to learn how to say no. And also in discussions with my manager, she would say that like, look, you should feel empowered to say
Hmm.
no to every request that comes across your plate. And I think also at Heineken, As I mentioned, I was the first one in this role, in this legal
Mhm.
operations seat. And so when I started, not everyone knew exactly, myself included, what exactly was this role going to do every day?
Yeah.
What was the focus going to be? And exactly what was the scope? We were still, a little bit kind of building the plane as we flew it,
Mhm.
so to speak. So we were figuring things out, and so a lot of people were coming up with ideas and things that maybe I
Mhm.
could help with. And so that was very good. I enjoyed and still do enjoy being parts of those discussions and identifying, is there a way for us to solve this? Um, but yeah, eventually, we reached a saturation point where you can't take everything on. If
Yeah.
you're, I think I've said this before, but if you're doing one thing, by default, you can't be doing
Mhm.
another thing. So it really does come down to priorities, and you have to focus on the biggest impact
Yeah.
items and biggest pain points, that you've aligned
Mhm.
with your management. So what I agree exactly I'll focus on with the GC is what I focus on. And if I can do other things, amazing. But at a bare minimum, I need to deliver on those.
Yeah. Makes sense. What were the first projects you were involved in Heineken? Like the bigger ones, like CLM, or what? Where did they already have it when you joined, or were they
Yeah, good
implementing?
question. So, no, we did not have a true CLM within Heineken when I joined, and that was kind of the first big project. We
Hmm.
did a couple of small
Yeah.
things,
Mhm.
including revamping kind of our communications calendar and things of that nature based on feedback from people within legal. But in terms of like a giant start from scratch project, it was CLM, and that
Mhm.
was because when I did that listening tour across the organization, basically the one common thread that everyone mentioned was the pain point around contracts. That it was taking an eternity, there was
Mhm.
no visibility, it was extremely frustrating for everyone across the entire process, including the counterparty. We had frustrated customers, frustrated suppliers, and we needed to figure out a way to help them. So that was a big focus that we embarked on a few years ago. And yeah, it's been an extremely large amount of work. Don't
Mhm.
get me
Yes,
wrong.
it is.
Every week I have way more calls and emails and things than I would hope for one subject, but at the same time, it's had an outsized impact on the company. A lot of our operating companies that have implemented CLM are seeing truly tremendous results.
Mhm.
Here at head office, we have hundreds of people using it for all types of workflows and contracts. So yeah, I think objectively, it's been a huge success.
Mhm.
And as a result, we're very easily able to articulate, clear value on a very key thing to Heineken, like contracting. And that's why now we're able to move forward with our procurement agreements, as I mentioned earlier, coming up
Mhm.
in a couple weeks, and then we're very quickly following up to operating companies with that. So
Mhm.
yeah, it's a very fast moving, fast evolving project. But every week, every seemingly day, we have more users and more contracts, more new workflows, not just no contracts being
Yes. Yes.
requested in the system. So it's
Okay.
been a huge success. But things in our legal spend management area, we've done a couple of big RFPs to select vendors and implement those over the last couple of years. We've, yeah, kind of revamped how we manage vendors entirely, and been some significant, I think, gains to Heineken overall in that regard, which has also helped to improve relationships with the vendors, which is a
Mhm.
big focus
Yeah.
for us. Um, and then, yeah, lots of other things from our business conduct side and our privacy teams on some of their compliance related projects and softwares that they need. And then also our internal patent team. We've worked a bit with them, got them some insight into some global patent data that they leverage for various purposes. That's a big area of focus for Heineken, is our patent strategy. And
Could you
yeah,
say more about
trying to
the
get the
patent?
most, I think. Sorry, what
I'm
was that?
sorry for interrupting. Could you say more about your approach to like helping the patent team? I'm asking because at my company we also have one. We never have one had one in my previous company, so I'm totally green when it comes to patents. We only have two people working in that team, and currently I'm not helping them with anything at all. So maybe I can get some insights from you on how you help to enable them further, or
Yeah. So I am not a patent expert by any
Mhm.
stretch of the imagination. Don't get me wrong. But yeah, we have a small but mighty team. I call them. It's two people. It's a patent
Say,
attorney and then a patent searcher here on the team in Amsterdam. They're our global patent team within legal. And yeah, they have a couple of different websites that they have subscriptions to that have all of the insights that they need from the various patent offices around the globe. And it's where they do all of their research and stay up to date on new patent filings and all of this stuff. And then we also help to connect some of those platforms to Power BI to help them visualize some of this
oh.
data, create dashboards. That's still early stages.
Mhm.
We're still improving upon that. But I think in the near future, that will be very helpful for how they share information across the organization and keep the right stakeholders involved into this very complicated but interesting subject. And the brewing industry is there's a lot historically with regards to patents, and so it's an important
Mhm.
one, not just for us, but
Yeah.
any brewer around the world.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Amazing. Well, I think that's.
I can
Oh,
share some
yeah.
of the tools later with you if you
Sure.
want.
Yeah. I
I
would
don't
love to.
remember all of them off the top of my head. I don't use them
Yeah.
myself,
Yeah.
but I hope to secure the budget and get the access for the team.
Yeah. I would love to know that. We can speak about that later. And also, I would love to know what CLM you guys are using. I can edit this out if you don't want to share it, but I'm just curious. We're using Ironclad and we love it.
Same one. Yeah, we're
Really?
also
Okay.
using Ironclad. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's the best one out there, honestly, from what we're
Yeah, I'm a
seeing.
big, a very happy customer. Yeah,
Mhm.
we've had nothing but good experience so far.
Same. And as you mentioned before, you guys are still building new workflows, and that's amazing because it's like once you learn the tool, which is it's not hard, I would say. Like there's some conditional logic going around and all that, but like once you learn it, you know it, and you can build your own workflows, which is great. You don't have to rely on third parties. You don't have to rely on Ironclad professional team for after the implementation, right? Like your team is
Exactly.
probably building those new templates on their own. Is that the case with you guys?
That's right. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And we have a third party that we use, Ironclad partner that helps
Hmm.
us with some of that work as well.
Hmm.
But yeah, we do a lot of it, and then we have basically access to a team that can help us from one of Ironclad's partners.
Got it. Yeah. Well, in general, I think everything you mentioned before was a great overview of what the legal operation is doing, like all the areas in which you're helping. Um, I think based on this conversation, people who are not in the field will have a better idea of what to expect when they're building out a legal ops function. And that the way you started from like one big project and then going into another, I think that's a typical um, approach to building a legal ops department. How would you? What would be your advice to companies that are starting out this with this new department in general?
Yeah, I think I get asked this question quite a bit. I think a few things that I would say is one, very you have to have a very good, you have to establish a very good close relationship with your GC. That's imperative because if you don't have that kind of top level down push and to help you enforce the importance and to enforce that buy-in from the top down, it's going to be nearly impossible to do what you want to do. It's going to feel like you're always pushing a boulder up the hill, so to speak. So that's imperative. So whatever you need to do, make sure you get a good relationship with the GC in place. Like that's truly imperative. And even in the interview process, if you're talking to an organization and yeah, they say yeah, the GC's not really involved and doesn't really care or have a passion for this, I think that's a huge red flag.
Mm.
And I have spoken to companies where that was the case, that it was not the GC driving this, it was someone underneath the GC, and the GC really didn't care too much about it. And I don't think that's a recipe for success.
Mhm.
So the imperative, very close relationship with the GC. Also, I would say really look for some low hanging fruit. So yeah, things like email distribution list and very basic dashboards related to budget or whatever. Anything else you might have some data that you can quickly spin together. That would be very easy places to start, just so you can start to show some of the value that you can provide and that you can quickly make some changes and some impacts that people will use and will see. And that's going to vary again, company to company. So I can't really tell you exactly what that would be, but I gave you a couple of examples. Um, and then don't be in a rush to just go out and buy some shiny piece of software. You really need to take a step back and understand what are our biggest pain points, and that's going to take you a little bit of time through conversation and as we've talked about, and alignment with the relevant stakeholders across your company. But once you have an idea of what those are, then you can actually start to develop a roadmap and then start to tick away and tackle these one by one. And in close alignment with your GC, understand what the priority is. And because if you think it's one thing, but the GC actually is like, you know what, I would have much rather seen us tackle these five other things before we went down that path, but you didn't know that, then you're setting yourself up for failure. So, yeah, understand the problem, understand what the process is. So map out exactly what's taking place today, and then understand what you're trying to fix or what you think you would like to improve on that process. And then start to think about what's an actual solution to this. And really look in first. Like, if you're using Google, Microsoft, whatever, there's so many tools available in those solutions, those giant platforms today. That I'm sure, especially at much smaller organizations, you can probably solve for a lot of these workflows in a less complicated business than Heineken is through some of those tools. I was playing around recently with Loom and Microsoft. I must admit I haven't used it much previously. I participated in one a couple of months ago, but I had never actually like set one up and used it myself. And yeah, it's very powerful what that tool can do. And I think I'm going to try and take more and more advantage of that. But there's so many things through Power Automate and all these other pieces available in Microsoft that yeah, are available to us. So without us needing to go out and spend time on an RFP and go to market and find a solution, if we can take advantage of what's already available, that's a huge win. And then for people who are very technical, being able to develop some of these things yourselves and leverage Copilot Studio to spin up a chatbot or whatever, right? I'm just using Microsoft as an example because that's what we use. But the possibilities have never been more than they are today, and I think there's never been a more exciting time to be working in innovation. So on the legal side, particularly. So yeah, be open-minded, understand what are the problems, and then start to be creative and think about ways to solve that. But really, like, try and see what you can do with what you already have available first, because a lot of times I think you'll be surprised. And don't be afraid. I think this is something I get really frustrated when I see people both here at Heineken and elsewhere. They focus on like, yeah, but we have to have like every single scenario under the sun that's ever gonna ever happen in the next 500 years covered. It's like, just focus on the 80%, the things that we know are going to happen this week and this month and this year. Let's focus on that, and we can handle these other one-off events separately. But like, don't let those that we're never very likely going to see, or in a very rare occasion, take away from us directly impacting the thousands of things that are happening right now. So really, don't be afraid of incremental improvements. Like, if you can
Mm.
get 70% improvement on a broken process, that's huge. So start there and then worry about the rest of it later.
Yeah, I think that's amazing advice for especially up and coming legal ops professionals newer to the field. Thank you so much for that,
Yeah,
Sean.
hopefully
But
it helps.
yeah, I think it will. And even, I'm listening to this, I'm thinking like, you're so right. Because I sometimes catch myself wanting to account for every scenario and I know I shouldn't. So now I'll pay more attention to that.
Yeah, and I think it's not to say that you shouldn't be aware of, what is possible and what could happen. And I'm not saying that's what you were saying, but I'm just saying we don't necessarily need to have a 100% fully fleshed out every single thing ever. Every scenario is solved and accounted for. It's okay to say we're going to solve for these 70%. The other 30% we're going to tackle and take them, as they go, but also like breaking things up into more manageable pieces and chunking them up is such a better way to try and quickly get up and running and show value. So like, yeah, if we had tried at Heineken to cover every single contract across the globe before we went live with the CLM, it would take us literally a decade or more before we could get live, and there's no way we were going to do that. So we, yeah, identified a few workflows for a few operating companies, and that's where we started. And then now, we have hundreds of workflows and thousands of users. So it's yeah, you really can improve and
Mhm.
iterate over time, and go step by step.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly with you, Sean. I do. Lastly, I wanted to ask you about your role with Clog as a regional leader. That's interesting because I just took on this role here in Canada. I have a co-chair, Remy Besson, who's helping me, but we're just starting out. We had one event so far; it was great. We had around 40 people who showed up for meet and greet and some cocktails and snacks. So that was
That's great.
great. We're now hoping to have another event. This will be a smaller group, around 15 to 20 people. Will go out for dinner together with like senior legal ops professionals. But I'm curious what it is that you guys are doing out there in Europe. Like maybe we can get inspired and create some similar events here. And what's your attendance like? Is there lots of people coming out to those events that you're organizing for the region? How does that look like?
Yeah, good question. So I think in the last like 18 months or so, since sometime early last year, I've noticed a huge amount of events, particularly here in my region, so in the Netherlands, and I'd say largely in Amsterdam. Uh, and these are big events from like organizations that have previously done big events in London, now opening and expanding into mainland Europe, and making Europe versions of these
Mm-hmm.
London events. Um, and then there's also a lot of kind of organic small groups that have spun up here in Amsterdam and elsewhere. So it's yeah, it's growing quite a bit. I still think like the as far as the huge like multiple hundred people events, those are still largely based in London,
Mm-hmm.
and then they will do kind of smaller but still quite sizable, like sometimes more than 100 at events across Europe. I know there was one in Spain earlier this year that I know a few people that went to that was pretty
Mm-hmm.
widely attended. But yeah, there's a lot here in Amsterdam as well. I was at Legal Geek Europe last week, and Crafty Council is doing one here in Amsterdam, actually at the Heineken Experience, right next to the building I'm in right now, coming up first week of October. So yeah, it's growing and growing quite a bit. And then in terms of clock
Mm-hmm.
specifically, so I'm the regional group leader for the Benelux region. I must admit, we haven't done too much
Mm-hmm.
because there have been so many other events,
Yeah, I
but we are
understand.
planning a dinner
Mm-hmm.
for later this year where we'll invite some people, and it should be a good get together. But there's a lot of different like happy hour groups and things
Yeah.
going on from other groups
Yes.
within the Netherlands.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a fun community. I know a lot of the people, but it's growing quite a bit. Like we were talking about earlier,
Mm-hmm.
seems to be new people joining each time, which is exciting,
Yes.
and more people are getting into the space. So it's fun. It's a good time, and it's a fun time to be involved.
Yes, I think so too. So it seems that for you, you have lots of legal operations professionals around you. Because like for me, I only know really here in the Greater Toronto area, maybe like a handful of people. So we wanted to create more events just to get to know one another, right? We're all in the
Yeah,
same space, and we should just collaborate and like learn from each other. So I'm excited for that, and I'm happy to
I'm
hear that in
surprised there's
Europe.
only a handful.
A handful of people
Yeah,
that I
it's less than I
know.
would have expected.
Yeah, so I'm sure there's more people. Like in our clock list, it shows around 80 people, but I don't know all of them, right? So it's just we're
Yeah,
trying to get connected. And when I meet other legal ops professionals, they're saying the same thing. They only know, again, a handful of people. So we just try to connect the group so that we have a larger community that we can reach out to, just to exchange notes and then see what you're doing, what you're improving at your company. And so just learn from one another. So I think that will be great once we get to that place, but long ways to go because still it's very small here. Yeah.
indeed. No, yeah, I think I'm a big like proponent of teams and people not trying to go about things alone, and
Mhm.
having a community, so to speak, and maybe for you as well, being a foreigner and an expat in
Mm-hmm.
the
Yeah.
country where you live. I think that's even more important because you don't have, maybe you do, I don't know, lots of family right
No,
around the
yeah, I
corner
don't.
that
Yeah.
you can call in
Mm-hmm.
a pinch or spend time with or whatnot. So yeah, you have to really try and grow these groups and to bring to try and find your quote unquote
Mm-hmm.
family. I'm not
Yes.
trying to get too corny,
No,
but
no,
I
you're
think you know
not. I
what I
understand
mean.
you completely. I
Yeah,
moved here
and
on
I
my
think
own as well, and I think you did probably just with your wife, or
yeah,
yeah.
indeed. Yeah. Yeah, so I think that goes a long way, and just having someone to bounce some ideas off of, and yeah, know that you're not going about it alone, and
Mm-hmm.
it's helpful just to hear sometimes that everyone is having the same challenges and the same frustrations. So you're definitely not alone. Big
Mm-hmm.
company, small company, everywhere in between. And yeah, whether you've been doing it for 10 years or 10 days, people are still facing a lot of the same challenges. But yeah,
That's very true.
anyone who might hear this in Toronto, I think you should join the clock group and any other groups that might exist in legal ops, and yeah, meet some people and share some stories, and have a nice meal or a drink of your choice.
Yeah. Thanks for that, Sean. And once
Yeah,
again, it was a pleasure having you on the podcast. It was great chatting with you. And I think this is a very inspirational episode because you provided lots of insight to legal ops professionals. And I think they will really benefit from that. I have a group of legal operations people that I'm meeting with every second week, and I will be sure to send them a link to this episode. There are people from all over the world, mostly from US, so I cannot connect with them personally, but I think they will really, really enjoy it. So thanks once again. It was great chatting with you, and I'll be in touch because I would like to chat a little bit more about some of the tools that you mentioned for the patent team.
sounds good. Yeah, and it was a pleasure. It was very nice to discuss a topic that I'm very passionate about. So thank you for the invite, and appreciate the time.
Well, thanks again.